Isles 0-1-1 to their season. I thought, and we said it on the post game. So if you don't know, on the YouTube channel, we're doing live streams like a half hour after each game. So check that out. But we were saying, like, yeah, they looked better overall and were much more structurally sound. And if you look at the money puck deserved to win-o-meter, the Islanders was cranked up. But at the end of the day, it's still a 3-0 loss. And you don't have a win through your first two games. So I get the frustration here, but I think we just got to kind of talk through what we've seen through the first two games.
Yeah, it is not ideal to effectively feel flat-footed coming out of the season. Right? You've had all this preseason. You've had that extra week of no game stress to deal with, so you should come out of the gates flying. Clearly, they don't against the Utah Hockey Club, whatever the heck we want to call them. They do very well against Dallas. But again, you want to come out of the gate flying. You want to be able to establish your game from the start. We are this good. We're so good that you have to play to us. And we don't have to grow into the season necessarily. We already grown type of thing. But that's not clearly what is happening with these New York Islanders, where they clearly have to grow in the season, which is fine. Because like any tournament, even the Stanley Cups, you grow into a tournament. The Islanders can grow into the season. And there is signs of growth. However, we might not want to agree with that.
No, and again, you wanna see the result too. Like, as much as it's nice to say, hey, like there were some things that improved from game 1 to game 2, and there's 80 out of an 82 game season left. Like, there's a lot of time, and if they do this, if they play like they did in game 2, they'll win a lot more than they lose. And like, all that could be true, and I think that's probably where we both stand for the most part, but that doesn't take away from the frustration through the first two games. Like, I think it's totally valid for you to be frustrated, especially when it's some of the same issues from a year ago that showed up. In game 1, especially the first game of the season against Utah, you got they played all the hits. It was the greatest hits tour where they blew leads, they lost in overtime. The penalty kill was horrible. The power play wasn't good enough. Like, whatever you could possibly think of the stereotypical 23-24 Islander season, like they hit them all in that game. So again, like my point here at the top is frustration's valid. I get it.
Yeah, it's I think for me and probably for you as well, where it starts to get like, okay, come on, is I'll lose the worst GM. Blue needs to be fired. It's done. This is awful. And you're going, this is not an apology for Lou Lamoriello. We're 2 games into the season. There are still 160 points to play for. They're not going to get them all. They just weren't. The Edmonton Oilers are Stanley Cup favorites. They're 0-2 on the season. 0-2. Not 0-1-1, 0-2. And they're playing obviously better than we are, the Edmonton Oilers, but like their expected goals, 65%. Ours is 60%, which is still fantastic. This is a 5-on-5, of course. Corsi 4, theirs is 68%. They're playing better than we are in that regards. And ours is 53%. These are still good numbers for the New York Islanders. But even a team that has better numbers than that still can't get this shit done. So let's cool the Jets a little bit, right? The expectations on the Oilers are still going to be sky high, even though they're 0-2. Our expectations are still not sky high, but I still believe they are exactly where they should be. 0-1-1 is not any sort of disaster whatsoever, where we now have to rethink everything we thought going into the year. It's not ideal, of course. And if you're feeling frustrated about it, that's totally valid. But let's not take it to the next degree where we're like, burn it to the ground, time for rebuild.
If they're still puttering around in January, then it's a completely different discussion, right? You're right. Like, or even I think you said American Thanksgiving after game 1, which is, a little over a month away. And, we'll see where they are at that point. Another one to bring up too, Nashville. They made a ton of moves. They had a splashy offseason. They're 0-2. They have a couple losses out of the gate. Again, this isn't a justification of how the Islanders played. It's not giving them a pass at all. There are clearly flaws with this team. There is clearly valid frustration, as we've hit on. It's kind of just doing a vibe check, and what I'm gathering from you is your expectation for this team hasn't changed based off their first 2 games.
No, because let's think about what we expected going into the season. Of course, we're only 2 games in. Like, anyways. But we have to do this because all of the rhetoric, all of the narrative right now, especially online, and that's just because kind of where we see it, is so negative. Like, here we go. Same goddamn Isles. We're going to be in this pits again. It's going to be awful. We have to revisit what our expectations were just a year ago. Even us, who are we're skew more positively than others, still said the Islanders are about a 100-point team at best, somewhere around 3rd to 4th in the Metropolitan Division. That was our expectation. What we're seeing here is still well within that expectation. They had a good bounce-back game against Dallas where they were the better team. It's not even questionable outside of the score sheet. But those games are definitely going to happen. If they're happening against Dallas, fine. You want to beat teams like Dallas. Don't get me wrong.
Of course. And they beat them twice last year in overtime, which is the irony, right? But in my opinion, Dallas is one of the teams that I am looking for as a legit contender to come out of the Western Conference, this year. Yeah. Like sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, they had a back-to-back, right? They played Minnesota today, and look who they had in net. We didn't face Jake Ottinger last year, which showed the respect they had for us then compared to what they have for us now. They played Jake Ottinger in game 1 of this back-to-back instead of playing them against Minnesota, telling you that the Islanders are the better team in that back-to-back. So they're giving us the respect that we deserve, and rightfully so based off of how we play. I just wanted to throw that in.
No, fair. That's fair.
So if these games are happening against Dallas, okay, we were the better team. We didn't win. The score line doesn't look flattering. 3-0 doesn't look great. But when you look at it under the hood, the Islanders were the better team. But if this is happening against Chicago or Columbus or Calgary, that's when you're like, we have a problem here. And it still might happen, but if it's happening consistently against these bottom feeder teams, that could be a problem. The expectation is still 100 points in my opinion. If you like that, make sure to subscribe to Up the Turnpike on Patreon for more exclusive New York Islanders content.